So good morning everyone, and welcome to the sunrise safari. And what a fantastic way to start off the morning. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie and I have Brian with me on camera this morning, as exciting as that is. And Brent and Andrew are on Jigger. Sorry, I'm on Wendy this morning. They're on Jigger and they are moving off into Djuma. And I have Tara and Lou in FC, sorting out all of our technological issues. And it is quite a chilly start this morning. It is 7 degrees centigrade, which is somewhere in the region of 44 degrees Fahrenheit, so it is very, very chilly this morning. And I'm sitting with wet hair, which is a decision that I regret intensely, but you can't really regret too much when you are out here looking at this amazing view of the male giraffe. One male giraffe and 2 females, and he is definitely courting that female who is at the back behind the, I think it's a leadwood tree that's fallen over. He's been following her this morning, and just a lovely view of them having their breakfast with the sun rising. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are looking at giraffe live. This is a live safari. So what you are seeing on your screens is what's happening right now, right here on the Sabi Sands in Djuma Game Reserve. And what a perfect way to start the morning. I can also hear branches cracking off in the distance. So I think that the elephants from yesterday's sunset drive are still in the area. They're not too far away. And for those of you who might have missed it, yesterday afternoon was a really, really exciting drive. We started with our forensic analysis of a drag mark and what we thought that Shadow and Sindile might have killed. And we ended the sunset drive with finding them on a Dacre kill, exactly as we called it. So very, very interesting. We got to follow that story from start to finish. And we have no idea whether or not it was Shadow or Sindile that killed that Dacre. In my opinion, Sindile is going to start making slightly larger kills. So we're going to go follow up and just see where those guys have gone a little bit later. But for now, we've got these wonderful giraffe up against a backdrop of that spectacular sunrise. Excuse me. And there we can actually see the male is courting the female, and he is following her around quite intently. Now it's hard to tell, but I think she's probably coming into estrus, the way that he keeps blocking her movements and just checking out where she goes at all times. And this tree that they're feeding on has got some considerable spines. It doesn't have thorns per se, but it does have some very thick, very solid spines. And it is always amazing to me how they can feed on it and just ignore those completely. Oh, the female's off again. And the male is hot, hot, hot on her tracks. There he goes. He doesn't want to let her out of his sight. It's almost certain that she is coming into estrus and he wants to keep track of her. do want to just stay with this particular pair because it could be interesting. Now generally what will happen is the female will reject the male for quite a considerable time period, and that's just to make sure that there's no other available better options for her. So she will keep playing hard to get, as it were, for the next few days before she comes into full estrus and decides to mate. And he has his work cut out for him because he's got to actually protect her from all of the other big males who might come into the area. And that's a strategy that a lot of females adopt in this area. It's just playing a little bit hard to get. They reject the male for quite a long time before they decide to mate with him, and it just gives them an opportunity to ensure that there's not a better opportunity for spreading their genes. I'm just going to try and loop around here. Is not young. He's a fairly mature bull, and Jenna from Oregon would like to know how old a giraffe can get. Well, Jenna, welcome to the Sunrise Safari, and the answer is well into their 20s. It depends on whether or not they're in the wild or captivity, but giraffe can reach anything up to, I think, 25 or a little bit older in age. And this particular bull that we've got here on our right, he is quite dark and quite mature looking. I always look at the face and the bump that sort of sits between their eyes in terms of judging their age, and I would say he's well into his teens. Definitely not the oldest bull that I've seen in this area recently, though. There was one a couple of days ago on the Sunrise Safari that had a broken ossicone, who was a good couple of years older than this male. And this female who's coming into estrus, she probably is waiting to see if there's a different, better option out there for her. So he's got lots of courting to do, lots of waiting around for now. And you can see those amazing lips of his at work. Incredibly dexterous mouths that they have, and then that amazing tongue of theirs that is very, very long, up to 1/2 meter. So about 1.5 feet worth of tongue that can stretch out, and it's black in color if you do get to see it. And that's because it's impregnated with melanin, which helps to toughen it against the thorns and the spines that they have to encounter while they're feeding. And you can see there's quite a considerable height difference here between the two of them. And that female is not young, she is definitely an adult and fully grown. And there is at least 1 meter difference in terms of their height between the male and the female. And you can see how she's ducking her head down to feed, and he is stretching right up to the top of that as far as he can reach. And that is fairly typical in giraffe. The females tend to lower their heads slightly. Obviously there's no set rule. They can feed as they will. But the females tend to duck their heads down more often, and the males tend to reach up. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this male is definitely courting this female, and if he is successful, then she will be fertilized. And Louis from Buffalo in New York, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. Louis would like to know what the gestation period is for a giraffe. Now, this is something that I can't remember for some reason off the top of my head, and I think it's somewhere in the region of 15 months, and I could stand corrected on that. It is quite a long gestation period, as it very often is for large mammals. Those little giraffe that are born have to be fairly well developed before they're born, because they need to be able to keep up with their mom. And they have a very, very rough start in life. They have to drop somewhere in the region of 2 meters and land fairly hard on the ground. So not an easy start for a little baby giraffe. And if he does manage to successfully court her, at some point she will let him mate if there are no better opportunities. And ex-Ranger has made a comment he says, mating giraffe would make for an interesting sight. Is a stepladder involved? And it does make for a very, very interesting sight. For the female, especially for young females, it can be quite an interesting experience for their first time. They are considerably smaller than the males, and watching them attempt to mount can be highly entertaining, because generally they don't get it right the first time around and tend to sort of balance on the back, and then the female moves off and they end up falling back down again. But it is something that is amazing to watch. And they really, really are enjoying this tree. Just having a look at the leaves, it still looks like a leadwood. It's right into the light, so it's silhouetted for me, but I think it is. They are still eating leadwood. There you can see as he moves, as the female decides to move off, so does the male. And he is definitely very, very interested in what she has to offer. She does seem to be less keen. And the female at the back could not be less concerned. This is not her issue to deal with at the moment. But that male is keeping a very, very close watch on that female. I'm just going to shift back slightly so that we can keep a nice view of the three of them. And what a nice way to start off the sunrise safari. Around this patch of trees. peaceful scene. And as I mentioned before, I don't think that this female is too young. And I'm not sure if you can see it, but the male, I've just been distracted, the male is dribbling slightly. The male was dribbling slightly, and it's difficult to see. It's just because he turned his head and it caught the light. And his saliva has reached almost there. He's licking his lips a little bit just to clear that up. But his saliva reached almost to the ground. And they do have nice thick saliva just to help them to protect their mouths against the thorns and the spines that they consume as they feed. They're off again. You can see all of the movement is initiated by that female. She decides where she wants to go, and the male is just tagging along. So that female, as I mentioned before I got interrupted by his incredible saliva trail, so that female is not young. I think she's quite a mature female, although her ossicones are still small, but she's got that nice dark color of a mature cow. And over the next few years, if she does mate with him, typically a giraffe will go sort of maybe 3 or 4 years in between births, and they generally don't give birth to twins. It's not impossible. The general rule is that they have a single calf, but they can have twins. So a female giraffe in her lifetime can produce somewhere in the region of maybe 5 to 6 calves, depending on their survival rate, of course. And there's a nice peaceful scene. There's nothing I enjoy more about giraffe than sort of sitting and just watching them feed and watching the way that their mouths move around the branches and the leaves, and those incredible tongues come into play. And as this group starts to move around and feed, we've got a group of 3 here. There's 2 females and a male. And giraffe don't have a set herd pattern. They tend to move around in sort of just casual aggregations, so just loose aggregations. They come and go as they please. They aren't necessarily sort of connected to each other or related in any way. They just come and go, move around as they want to. And so probably these 2 females are not related, and the male definitely isn't. And they're not territorial in any way. Basically, the only time that giraffe come into contact, physical contact and competition, is when there is a female in estrus. So over the next few days, if this male is going to be successful in his courting efforts, he's going to have to make sure that that female is defended from any other males in this area. And if this giraffe female does mate with this male and fall pregnant, and she does successfully give birth, it is a harsh world out there for a little baby giraffe, and Maggie would like to know what the survival rate is for baby giraffe out in this amazing Sabi sand area. And Maggie, good morning and welcome to the Sunrise Safari. I couldn't give you an exact number. I do know that life is tough out there for baby giraffe, but their mothers can be unbelievably defensive of them. So one kick from a female giraffe could definitely kill a hyena or a lion if they put it in the right place. But that being said, there's a lot out there that could take down a baby giraffe, mainly lions and lions and hyenas, and they will chase them down. But it is not unheard of for a large male leopard to also take down baby giraffe. But that being said, I think that the survival rate for little ones could be quite high, at least higher than for some of the smaller members of general game. So things like zebra and wildebeest would probably, their infant mortality is probably much higher than the giraffe is. One thing I have noticed about giraffe is that they don't tend to stick as closely to their calves as other general game animals, so zebra and the wildebeest, impala. The babies often are seen sort of in little nurseries or creches, off on their own with maybe one adult female. And the females will move off quite far from their babies. So I'm just going to shift around and see if we can still get a nice visual of this giraffe feeding. So guys, while I try and keep up with the giraffe, I'm sure you're wondering what Brent has been up to this morning. So I'm going to send you across to Jigga, and I will be back with you in a few moments. Enjoy.
Good morning and welcome on this very chilly sunrise safari. My name's Brent. I'm going to be your safari guide for the next 3 hours of live safari. I have Andrew, or better known around these parts as the Aardvark, on camera with me today, and I'm sure Jamie has taken care of the rest of the introductions. So I'm sure quite a few of you saw me wandering around in front of the Djuma cam. I was looking at male leopard tracks. So that male leopard walked straight north into the drainage line in front of WildEarthTV camp. There are guests in camp at the moment, that's why we're going to leave the area. I'm going to go check on the northern and eastern boundaries, following up on possibly lion tracks. Maybe those Birmingham boys have come back. I did hear them roaring at about 4 o'clock this morning, so going to go have a look there. And James is out on tracking team, so he's going to wait for the guests to get out on drive, and then he's going to go follow up on those male leopard tracks. But very exciting, and unfortunately, I hate to admit, but Andrew and I were having a temperature argument again this morning, and I said it was about 11 degrees, Andrew said it was 9, and Andrew was closer, and it irks me so much, and it's 7 degrees, 44 Fahrenheit, so quite chilly. The second coldest day that I've been out and drive, the coldest we've had was 5, so I presume that's just under 40 Fahrenheit, and that's the coldest we've had all winter. I know for a lot of you that sounds like a balmy summer's day. You should get out the bikinis and the bathing suits, but for us who live out here in the bush, it's without being rude, it's ridiculously cold, freezing in fact, as you can see. If you actually got to see the Aardvark, it would be quite a sight. Beanie, buff, you can't even see. All I can see is these bright sunglasses shining back and reflecting in my eye, and as with most things about the Aardvark, just very irritating. But anyway, let's carry on. Let's go see if we can find some lion tracks. So I can just hear the other vehicles getting moving on the radio, and they are able to operate further to the east of us, where the Djuma pride was found yesterday. So I'm just going to jump on the radio for a few seconds, find out from Craig and Ephraim if there's been any updates on those lions possibly moving to the west and to the north towards us. Craig. Morning, Craig. What was the last position of Nkahuma's last night, and has there been any update on the Birmingham boys? Copy, thanks very much, Craig. So, sorry about that. Copy, thanks. I'm going to do bottles up to the east and then Sheeta Cut line to the south. So, the Nkahumas are in Torchwood, which is to the east of us, or the last tracks. Apparently there's a big herd of buffalo around there, so maybe they have been hunting them overnight. And the Birminghams were left last night lying up on that stolen buffalo that they managed to steal from the sticks and the timbers. So it'll be very interesting to see if they have decided to come back further north. So we're going to head into that area and have a look. Since we're chatting about lion movements, there's someone out there who's obviously a huge fan of the Matimba male lions, and they go by the Twitter handle Matimba male lion, and they would like to know a bit more about what are the Matimba male lion movements. The last I heard, they were further to the east by themselves, so obviously the Birminghams did manage to push them, and we will hopefully hear possibly later today on Drive whether or not they've been found this morning and where they are exactly. Last I heard they were very close to the Kruger Park boundary, so obviously trying to avoid those 5 marauding Birmingham boys. And no update on the sticks. They headed south after that encounter with the Birminghams. I think they are down to the south of us in the property called Mala Mala. While we head off to go in search of all these big cats, we're going to cross back to Jamie, who is with a mobile journey.
So guys, welcome back. I hear that you've been getting a bit of an update. Sorry Brian, there's a termite mound that I can't go around. I hear you've been getting an update on the various lion movements, so still exciting times ahead for all of us in this particular area with the Birminghams and the Timbers and where the Nkahumas are moving about. I'm just trying to catch up with our giraffe friends that we started with. They are still here, but they are on the move. It is actually quite entertaining to see. The female could not be less bothered about the male, but he is definitely keen to see what she's up to. And at the moment they're doing my favorite giraffe pose, which is staring intently in my direction, just to see what I'm up to. And that is a very, very common giraffe strategy, to stare off in the direction of the noise or the threat. As we're looking at these two giraffe, I always find that although I see them all the time and I'm very, very used to seeing them, sometimes if I stop and look very closely, they start to look very, very strange with their long necks and their long legs. An incredible species, an incredible specimen of evolution. And Ashley from Birmingham would like to know if they're closely related to any other species. Well, they are related to the antelope species in terms of the way that their feet are structured, but they are quite unique in their own way. As far as I know, probably their closest antelope relative is the okapi, which we find further north into Africa, which is an antelope with a slightly longer neck. The giraffe are pretty much unique as a species. And there's sort of a curious mixture of many different animals here. So the way that they walk with the same side of their body, so right front, right back, left front, left back at the same time, is a trait that is shared only with a camel. And you can see that that feeding height is so tremendously out of the reach of almost all other herbivores except for maybe elephants, or definitely elephants. They're the only other animal that can match them in terms of feeding height. So definitely a very unique species. And one that actually consists of a great deal of subspecies as well. There are so many different subspecies of giraffe, and it's actually quite hotly contested as to how many there are. Most of the sort of biologists and scientists are agreeing on 7, but that is very much a matter for debate. So in South Africa we've only got the one subspecies, which is the one that we're looking at now, with this male and female just having a wonderful meal. And one of my favorite parts of the giraffe is probably those wonderfully long eyelashes, which of course, as with everything out here, serve a very important purpose in terms of protecting that eye as they're feeding, particularly in thorny trees. But their eyesight is fairly good, but as with most herbivores and prey animals in this area, their dominant senses tend to be their hearing and their sense of smell. But their eyesight is fairly good, and that's useful especially when your head is positioned so high above the ground. And as I drove into this sighting, both this male and the female stopped to stare me down, and that is a sort of combination of two things. One, they get to just evaluate and check up on what kind of threat anything poses, but two, it's also an intimidation factor, or at least a warning factor to any kind of threat, especially some of the larger big cat predators, just to let them know, hey, I've seen you and now I'm watching you. It's a good way of just letting them know that they're not going to be able to creep up on them. There you can see the male intently following a rather disinterested female this morning. I think he has his work cut out for him for now. Might take him a little while before he has any luck. But persistence is always valuable. They are just moving off into this block. I will try and stay with them. So quickly I'm going to send you across to Brent and I will reposition for the giraffe and see you later.
Welcome back, guys. Just behind that Ziziphus macronatum, or buffalo thorn, it's a little female duiker. Maybe we might be able to get a view of her if I go back a little bit. Let's have a look. And we can see that. So she's just had a drink at Buffels Hook Dam and she's now moving back into the bush. And female duiker, we don't often get to see them nice and clearly like this very often. And females are very cute because they have, it looks like they've got that little horn. It's actually a little tuft of hair between her ears there. Duiker species in general can be quite a strange little antelope. They have been known to be omnivorous, so not only eating grass, they've been recorded eating birds' eggs before, or this particular, the bush duiker or grey duiker. The duiker species that occur in the Central African rainforest actually have been known to actively hunt francolin and other small forest creatures, and eat millipedes. So very, very interesting, and that's possibly because in that area there isn't enough vegetation for them, so they have evolved to be able to source nutrients from other areas. But we're up at Buffels Hook Dam at the moment. We just came here to stop and have a listen, see if we could hear any alarm calls or even better, calling from the predators. Unfortunately, nothing yet. And very, very still morning out here, and we're going to keep moving. We just decided to do a little loop round. We're going to head back up to the northern boundary and then continue east. Oh, Andrew, there's an Egyptian goose silhouetted by the sunrise on that dead knobthorn over there, alerting us with our presence with a very goose-like wah. There we go. Unusual. You can only see one. I'm sure the other is not far away. Nice silhouette. And you'll find birds like ducks and geese need very, very particular trees to land in. Obviously, with those big webbed feet, they need quite a large tree, and preferably a dead tree without lots of little branches and things for them to get caught up on. And when they do nest, it is quite the sight to see the goslings for the first time leaving the nest. They literally plummet to the ground from up to 7 or 8 meters sometimes, and literally that nice soft down feathers that they have when they are little cushions their landings. Although quite often if you do see a goose or a duck with a deformity in its leg or whatnot, it is probably from when it was a gosling and leaping out of the nest and plummeting to the ground to get to water for the first time. Okay, well, let's continue on. So guys, I've got to go through a very big dip, so bear with us for a few seconds. We might have a little bit of signal breakup, but we'll be out of it in 2 ticks. Dyker just popped across the road, disappearing into the bush at high speed, unfortunately. But we did have such a nice view of that little female now, and it's quite nice. We don't often get great views of Dyker. They generally are fleeting, disappearing glances. On antelope species, Tom from Idaho, welcome Tom. Tom says he's seen a reedbuck at night on the waterhole camps, and he's wondering if we ever see them during the day on the drives. Now the Dyker, there just seems to be a plethora of Dykers around here this morning. That's the third one in the space of about 100 meters. Sorry Tom, back to your question on a reedbuck. Tom, this area where we are in the Sabi Sands is not ideal country for reedbuck. They prefer